Hard to the other side. Then we can open the legs and we'll come into a squat position. Beautiful squats. So in the squat, we let the hips sink low and we think about lengthening the spine and opening the heart. They have their hands in prayer, that's great. And before we move into the next pose, which is the crow, it's good to let the hips open up a little bit here because it's actually going to prepare us and kind of stretch out for the pose. If you're like me, my heels don't always come down. That's okay. A good support or adjustment for that is if you have somebody take their hands in front of you, and then if you lean back, I'll be able to lean back and get my heels on the floor. So it allows me to feel that lengthening of the spine and sinking of the hips that I couldn't feel just because of the way my ankles are. It doesn't allow me to get that center of gravity to feel that. So that's a great adjustment to do. So from here we can bring the hands to the floor and the crow. We bring the knees up on top of the elbows or the shins on top of the triceps and shifting the weight forward. Beautiful. So these guys have done crow before, obviously. And here we go. So Kim, I'll just point out, you can notice her forearms are nice and vertical. From the wrist right up to the elbow, this right nice and vertical. Whereas Ryan's are out a little bit, so he's probably actually putting a little bit more effort into it than he needs to. If he brings his elbows a little closer together, he'll feel a little bit more structural support, and you can lower it back down. So they're both very familiar with crow. I'll just give Ryan a couple things, or I'll demonstrate a couple things. So the forearm vertical for the crow, and then the other thing is the difference between here, where my elbows and my knees are on the outside of my elbows, or here, where my knees are on the inside of my elbows, relative to my body. Because if you get them here, then you can really let them rest on the knees. If they're outside, then you have to hug them in, and it takes a lot more energy. So in terms of hand width, we can just experiment with a hand width. Sometimes people want them closer, some people will feel better wider, anything's fine. And looking, a couple feet in front is good. And then of course, if you're just starting this, you can have a pillow in front. So if you fall down, you can land on the pillow. It's probably best not to have rocks in front. And always take your glasses off if you're doing this, for the same reason, in case you fall forward. So come back into the crow. Try it one more time. Think about
higher up.
So you're going to bring your elbows out. So lower your chest down and bring your elbows out. And then bring your knees up on top of your triceps. And then think about shifting forward. There we go.
Right. Absolutely.
Does that feel different?
It's a lot easier.
Yeah. And then from here, it looks like you might even benefit from bringing your hands a little wider, because I see your elbows are out. And if you bring your hands a little wider, then I think your elbows will be right on top of your wrists. Maybe bring your elbow. Can you hug yourself in a little bit farther? Bring your elbows closer together.
Oh.
There we go. Beautiful. So anything like that. So, this is a pose where the body structure really makes a big difference. So your length of your arms, the length of your torso, flexibility of your hips, the length of your legs is going to make a big difference. So every pose is going to look a little different. So you've seen Ryan's pose, you've seen Kim's pose, and you'll see tons more poses out there. So just there's kind of a spectrum, I think, of the way people approach the pose. Let's see, probably from the side, is I typically approach it with my hips pretty low. So I stay low with my hips and I just bring my heart low, bring my hands here, bring my knees up, extending of the ankles, that's another thing. You get that extra height through the extension of the ankles, and then I shift forward. So this is the crow I typically do. My hips are pretty low, and I'm just kind of hanging out here. The other way to approach it is with high hips. A lot of people do it like this. They keep their legs more straight, so their hips are higher, and those, same thing. Extension of the ankles, and then you shift forward. But it just looks a little different, a little higher up. So, anything is fine. It just depends on people's preference. And then we talked about elbow width. Some people will be close, some people will be wider. I guess I find that if they're a little wider, it's easier to bring your elbows out, then it's easier to get your knees up on top of your elbows. As opposed to if you're in closer, then your elbows are more pointed back. So if you're in real close, you'll actually kind of be bringing your knees more into your armpits. And this is kind of another variation. So elbows close, or hands close, elbows reaching back. You see they're bending back. And then we can lift up. So like that, it's kind of a more straight-armed crow. So there's really a wide variation of the crow. And I guess when I'm first teaching people, I tell them they don't even need to pick up their toes. They just bring their hands down, and maybe they just feel comfortable here, or maybe they don't even feel comfortable here, but they can stand it. Then the next step is to lengthen the ankles and just shift the weight onto the elbows, and you just stay here. And this is good for some people because they're strengthening their arms, they're strengthening their bones, they're strengthening all their tendons in here and kind of getting that balance. And then just people keep shifting forward. So we're not picking up the toes, because if we're here and we just pick up the toes, of course we're going to fall back. We're just going to fall right back, but we have to shift forward. So you just shift forward as far as you're comfortable, and if the toes are on the floor when you're still comfortable, that's fine, or maybe they'll just come up, and that's fine too. So it's a slow shift of the weight over the elbows. It's not just like a pick up, because it's difficult to just like balance. It's like when we're walking, we don't just pick up the leg. We shift onto the leg, and then the other leg naturally comes up, and we shift. So it's the same thing in the crow. You just shift forward, and if the toes come up, that's fine. So a lot of people, right here is a lot of benefit for them. It'd be crazy for them to come up, but it's also maybe crazy to avoid the pose altogether. If you have wrist problems or something, that's a different story. You don't want to be doing this at all. But for most people, we just have general weakness in the arms, or maybe poor balance, or any other reason that people can't come into the full pose, you can still get benefits just by being here. So that's the crow. So spotting the crow, if you go into the crow, so it's not so much an adjustment as it is a spot. And I'm going to bring my feet here and my elbows on my knees, and then I can really support here. So you can lower right down onto me, fall forward. There we go. So I can support her totally right here. So this is really important to get. My elbows on my knees and my hands here, and then my back is nice and straight, and I can support a lot of weight here. It's not this, because then I'm so weak, like my arms can hold so much. But if my elbows are on my knees, it's so tight. So you guys can try that. Just go like this. Yeah, so it's because I can push right here, and she can really support it because her elbows. And then if you bring it right here, bring it off, and then it's just like there's no support. So it's such a different pose, because you really have to be able to hold somebody's about half their weight, if they're really coming forward. So it's really critical to get this position. You're comfortable, and you got them. You got them, because they're going to be trusting you. And they're, if they hit their head, then they're going to be like, forget it, I'm never doing that again. Or they could get injured, which would be probably worse. So after the crow, we're back in the squat, and you can stay here for another 5 breaths. Typically it feels a little bit easier because we've just opened up the muscles again in the crow. And let's bring the hands in front, and we'll slowly, out in front, and we'll just slowly stand up with a flat back. Beautiful. Or you can come up any way that's comfortable for your back. And then we'll